Have you ever wondered what would happen if you could structure your company to feel less like a corporation and more like a collection of mini startups? That's the big promise behind one of the most influential and honestly most misunderstood ideas in modern business, the Spotify model. Today, we're going to break down what it is, and just as important, what it isn't. Okay, so let's start with the one question that basically haunts every successful startup. You're small, you're scrappy, you're innovating like there's no tomorrow, but then you grow. And with growth comes the processes, the meetings, the bureaucracy, and all of a sudden that speed that made you great in the first place, it's just gone. So how do you scale up without slowing down? Well, this is the exact challenge Spotify was staring down. Back in 2012, they shared how they were tackling it, and it pretty much became the stuff of legend. What they came up with was an approach to scaling agile that was way less about rigid rules and way more about culture and people. And here's the absolute crucial point you have to get. The Spotify model isn't some framework you can just install like a piece of software. It's really just a snapshot of Spotify's company culture at one point in time. It's a philosophy, right? It's built on empowering teams to work with autonomy and a real sense of purpose. So how did Spotify actually make this philosophy a reality? Well, they came up with a pretty unique structure and some terminology that's now famous. Let's break down the key building blocks. First up, we've got the squad. The best way to think of a squad is like a little mini startup. It has everything it needs to design, develop, test, and release a product. We're talking developers, a product owner, an agile coach, the whole package. They've got a clear mission, and here's the key. They have the freedom to choose how they work, whether it's Scrum, Kanban, or something totally different. Now, if you have a bunch of squads all working in the same general area, let's say everything related to the music player, you group them into what's called a tribe. A tribe is basically a lightweight way to make sure those related squads are all aligned, with a tribe lead who helps everyone collaborate and kind of row in the same direction. But that brings up a good question, right? If every squad is totally autonomous, how on earth do you maintain quality and consistent standards? Well, that's where chapters come in. A chapter is like your professional family. It groups together people with similar skills, say all the iOS developers within a tribe, so they can share knowledge and maintain best practices, all guided by a senior tech lead. And the final piece of this puzzle is the guild. This is probably the most organic part of the whole system. Guilds are totally voluntary communities that cut across the entire company. Anyone who's passionate about a topic, could be a new programming language, could be web accessibility, anything, can join a guild. It's how knowledge spreads and innovation really bubbles up from the ground floor. Okay, so you've got squads, tribes, chapters, and guilds. Why go through all this trouble? It really all comes down to the incredible power of one single thing: autonomy. When you organize your company this way, the benefits become really clear. You get less rigid process and way more self-management. Decisions get made by the people who are actually closest to the work, and all of this creates a high-trust environment where teams feel truly empowered to experiment, which, leads to better products and happier, more engaged employees. This really gets to the core of the whole philosophy, and it's captured perfectly by this idea that control leads to compliance, autonomy leads to engagement. See, the model is fundamentally an exercise in trust. And when you trust people, you don't just get them to follow the rules, you unlock their genuine engagement and their creativity. Okay, this all sounds pretty amazing, doesn't it? Like the perfect blueprint for success. But here is the big twist. This is the part that so many organizations get completely wrong. So the obvious question becomes, great, can I just take this model, plug it into my own company, and get the same results? And the answer to that is a huge, resounding no. As the folks who wrote about this bluntly put it, just changing the names of your teams to squads without changing the culture underneath, it's pointless. The labels mean absolutely nothing without the philosophy. The key thing to understand is that this was never really about the structure itself. It was about the culture that made the structure possible. You can't just copy the org chart. You have to build that high-trust environment and the mindset of autonomy first. Without that cultural foundation, the whole model is just, it's an empty shell. So if you shouldn't just copy and paste it, what is the real takeaway here? Well, the goal was never to become Spotify. It's to learn from Spotify's journey. So here are the principles that you can actually use. 1. Don't copy, adapt. Understand the mindset, then figure out what parts might fit your unique context. 2. Make trust your default setting. Find decisions that are being made way up high and push them down to the teams. 3. Focus on building community and transparency to break down those silos. And finally, 4. Create a culture where it's actually safe to experiment and learn from your mistakes.
And here's the ultimate proof that this is a journey, not a destination. Even Spotify doesn't use the Spotify model anymore. They've kept evolving, adding new structures like trios and alliances to solve new problems as they got bigger. This just goes to show you that the model was never a static blueprint. It was a living example of a company that's committed to constantly improving. So I'll leave you with this question to chew on. Take a look at how your own team works. What is one approval gate, one reporting process, one rigid rule that only exists because of a lack of trust? And what do you think would happen if you just replaced it with autonomy instead? That right there is the real spirit of the Spotify model.